Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue the war with Hamas, whose health ministry in Gaza say that some 22,000 people have been killed. The death toll during the ongoing war in the Gaza Strip has risen to some 22,000, with over 58,000 wounded, according to the Ministry of Health in Hamas-run Gaza, who say that two-thirds of those killed are women and children. Dozens of bodies of those killed due to the Israeli bombing arrived at Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in the Palestinian city of Deir el-Balah in the central Gaza Strip, as mourners gathered in the hospital's courtyard for funeral prayers before taking the dead for burial. The search for victims of Israeli airstrikes continued at the Al-Maghazi refugee camp. Palestinian civil defence said that ambulances were unable to reach the targeted areas due to heavy bombardment. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to continue the war that began on October the 7th. A rocket launched by Palestinian militants from Gaza towards Israel activated sirens in the south of the country on Saturday night. 11 people have been killed following a Russian strike on Ukraine's partially occupied Donetsk province on Saturday, according to regional authorities. 5 children were among the dead and 8 further people were wounded in the attack on Pokrovsk district. Emergency services say the number of victims could increase as around 6 more people appear to be under the rubble of one of the destroyed buildings. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that Russia will feel the results of every such attack, adding that no such strike will go without consequences. Also on Saturday, Ukraine's military claimed it successfully attacked the Saki military airbase in the west of the Russian-occupied Crimean Peninsula. Meanwhile, the Kharkiv prosecutor said a missile which hit the city on January the 2nd appears to have been made in North Korea. The US recently claimed that Russia is deploying North Korean missiles in Ukraine. Orthodox Christians around the world celebrated Christmas, which falls overnight on January the 6th to the 7th, according to the Julian calendar. In Bethlehem, in the West Bank, Patriarch Theophilos III of Jerusalem led midnight mass celebrating Greek Orthodox Christmas at the Church of the Nativity. In Moscow, the Russian Orthodox Church Patriarch Cyril led the Divine Liturgy service at the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour. Residents in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv celebrated the Feast of Epiphany on the eve of the Orthodox Christmas by diving into the cold Dnipro River. In Belgrade, Serbian believers marked Christmas Eve by burning oak branches at sermons held outside churches and temples. Thousands of worshippers dived into the wintry waters of rivers and lakes across Bulgaria to retrieve crucifixes cast by priests during Epiphany ceremonies. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in the Jordanian capital Amman on Saturday. The top US diplomat is continuing his visit to the Middle East amid growing tensions in the region. Blinken began his tour by visiting Turkey and Greece, where he addressed the ongoing war in Gaza. Jordan is the first Arab nation on Blinken's tour and will be followed by Qatar, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. He will then visit Israel and the West Bank before wrapping up the trip in Egypt.
EU top diplomat Josep Borrell warned against the conflict in Gaza spilling over into Lebanon on Saturday. Speaking from Beirut alongside Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati, Borrell said it's absolutely necessary to avoid Lebanon being dragged into a regional conflict, adding that already thousands of civilians have been displaced in Lebanon.
And I think that the war can be prevented.
أعتقد بأنه يمكن تجنب الحرب
has to be avoided.
ويجب أن نتجنبها.
And diplomacy can prevail to look for a better solution. It is imperative to avoid a regional escalation in the Middle East. It's absolutely necessary to avoid Lebanon being dragged into a regional conflict.
Borrell's comments came as Lebanon's Hezbollah militia fired dozens of rockets at northern Israel on Saturday, warning that the barrage was its initial response to the targeted killing, presumably by Israel, of a top leader from the allied Hamas group.